Hey guys, this is RolloutReviews with RolloutReviews bringing you a metal build Gundam review. This time it is the 00 Riser Special Markings version. First things first, this is not a model kit. It's not Gunpla. Instead, it's a hefty chunk of Chigokin. This thing has a generous amount of metal all throughout its inner frame. It's also a Bandai Collector Shop exclusive, and those two things together don't make this cheap. You're gonna need to know that going into this review. With that aside, we're not going to be taking a look at his packaging just because it's far too big for my humble little reviewing setup here. If you want to know what that looks like, Google Images is a thing for a reason. Anyway, let's start our journey taking a look at everything this set comes with, starting with the 00 Gundam itself. I'm not joking when I say that this is a hefty piece. It is full of metal. Now, some people are skeptical about the metal build line just because the majority of the die-cast content is completely internal. Some people just like that tactile, cold-to-the-touch feel that other Chigokins can offer, and that's completely understandable. But I've also heard it said that you don't really get it. You don't really fully understand what the metal build line is trying to accomplish until you have one in hand, and I cannot agree with that more. It's all really well placed and really well distributed all throughout the figure for something I've never experienced before. Now, while most of it is internal, just due to the nature of the 00's design, a lot of it makes its way externally, especially here in the legs. Got big pieces of zinc in his feet, especially at the bottom here, so he stands really well, despite all this weight up top. His whole groin assembly here is just a huge chunk of die-cast, which means metal-on-metal contact joints that feel really good. He's got a fair bit in his waist here. I'm not sure exactly how much, but it looks like a fair chunk. Up in his elbows. And of course, these solid die-cast appendages holding on his binders. Once again, it all just feels really good. His details are great as well. He's got all these little tampo markings here. Very tiny, very crisp, and really well done. And there are a countless amount of them all throughout. They're essentially those little rub transfer decals you get with master grades. However, here it's done for you, and expertly done, if I say so myself. Inside the little condensers there. The translucent plastic used looks really great. Meticulous little details all throughout. Little translucent pieces in the thrusters or condensers back there. Just looks fantastic. Now, the one problem, if I had to have one, with the construction of this guy is in the head. Now, it's not the materials, and it's not even how it looks. In fact, the sculpt there is very well done, very sharp. However, his V-fin here, including the jewel and the bottom one, is all one piece, and all translucent red plastic. Now, to me, that just seems a little bit lazy. They should have made those separate pieces, because in certain lighting conditions, if you have a light source coming from behind, you can clearly see right through these top fins, no matter how thick the paint application may be. And it just doesn't look all that great. However, in most lighting conditions, it looks flawless, and I cannot deny that. So, not too big of a problem. Now, there's also little nub marks on some of the smaller, fine details, and that will annoy plenty of people, especially considering what you're going to be paying for this. Once again, understandable, but it doesn't really bother me all that much. For articulation, his head is on a double joint, both a ball and a hinge. It allows it to go side to side, left, and right. Up about that far, and down about that far. Let's get the binders out of the way here. These can go back about this far, and pretty far forward as well. They also have a little joint that allows them to slightly go up and down. There is a rotation here, but it can be a little bit difficult getting it around the appendage. So to counteract that, it's got a little sliding mechanism here. It goes out that far, allowing you to swing it all the way back, or all the way forward. The hinge here allows it to go out this far, and while it doesn't lock into place, it's a pretty tight joint, so it shouldn't have too much of a problem holding up the binders for the 00 riser. The arms go out about that far, forward and back unhindered. There's also a little joint there as well. They rotate, they bend at the elbow quite far, and there's another little joint here. Now, the hands rotate, but they also have this little hinge here. However, you're not going to get much range out of it just because of the way the hands attach. The waist rotates. It's on a joint that I wouldn't call loose, but I wouldn't call tight either. However, all of my metal build figures have this problem, so maybe it's just the way they're put together. You also get an ab crunch, and he can move back just a little bit there as well. Now, he doesn't have a side-to-side joint like some of the model kits, and that's probably a good thing, so that when you have him in the 00 riser configuration, he's not flopping left and right. Now, the side skirts go out this far. They're just on a hinge. They're not on a swivel or anything, and this back piece cannot move at all. However, you can bring up the beam sabers so he can grab onto them, and that's nice. The front skirt has a little swivel, and in most cases that'll be enough. However, there's this weird extra little joint that separates and hinges up, so you can get a lot more leg movement. I rarely ever use this, and honestly it ends up looking a bit strange with that big gap there. The legs can go up pretty far, back pretty far, and out pretty far. There's a rotation there. Semi-limited, but nothing is really out of range. His knees can bend like a whole 180 degree, which is great. You have a little hinge here on this armor bit. The foot can go forward about that far, back, well, about that far. He's got 90-degree ankle tilts, which is crazy and awesome. And a little toe joint there. So he's crazy articulate. The metal build line is sort of a semi-continuation of the metal composite line, whereas that line sort of focuses a bit more on display. This is more focused on, well, the build quality and articulation, and I prefer that a lot more. For accessories, we'll start with his selection of hands. You get standard fists. You get a couple of splayed open hands, which I have on him right now. Some hands for holding beam sabers or the Geon Sword 2s at kind of an angle with a tilted wrist. You get some multi-purpose hands for holding the Geon Sword 2s, the Geon Sword 3, or feasibly beam sabers. And you also get some hands which seem specifically molded for holding the Geon Sword 2s in gun mode. However, you could probably stick a beam saber in there as well. Speaking of beam sabers, two of them are stored on the back here, which just pop off. And you can stick a pink beam in there. Those look pretty nice. You get two of them, and they've got a cool silver gradient. Swapping hands is simple enough. They're made out of kind of a a rubbery material, so it's both easy to pop them on and off, and it's also easy to sort of fit accessories inside them without much trouble. We'll give him one of these hands and one of these hands for now. Of course, you can just slide one of the beam sabers in like that, and it looks pretty good. You also get his surfboard of a shield, the Gean Shield 2. Of course, this is its combined mode. You got a peg there and a peg there, and it'll plug onto his arm either like that or like that. There's no option in between, unfortunately, but that's the way it's supposed to be. I never really liked that. You can split these apart, and there's some sliding pieces here and here, which allow you to put these little pegs in those little holes on his binder. Same for the other side. I've always loved the way that looks with his shields stored on his Gean drives. You also get his Gean Sword 2s. This is sort of their combined lance mode via this central piece. It is a separate piece, unfortunately, and if you want them separated, you sort of have to, well, put this off to the side. My one complaint with the Gean Sword 2s is the fact that this connection between the blade and the hilt is really, really loose. It's not too much of a problem for display, but it just seems kind of weird because it's sort of just slotted in there. There's no mushroom cap on the end. There's no pin. Just sort of sits in there. I question that. It also has the green sight instead of the blue one, so not entirely anime accurate, but concept art accurate if nothing else. There's little pegs on the side. I'll allow this to rotate and attach to his side skirts if you'd like. There goes the blade. Let's plug that back on. Actually, you know what? Let's just use this one. Of course, you can also have him hold those as a sword, or you can transform it into its gun mode. That rotates, this piece comes down, and this little handle slides down as well, with a bit of a trigger on it. From there, you can just slot it into the hand fitted for it. Now, it's supposed to, if I can get it in, it's supposed to sort of peg into that little hole on his arm, and I can never get it to reach for some reason. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but he holds it just fine regardless. And there he is, all armed up. The next weapon in his arsenal is a bit more exclusive to the 00 Riser, but since it interacts with the O Riser, we'll take a look at it now. Here is the Gean Sword 3. It's huge, and it looks awesome with the translucent green plastic on the blade. Nice tampo details as well. It's got a hinge here, and also a little hinge on the handle itself, allowing you to attach it to his arm a lot easier. There's a peg here, which will port into the hole on the back of his arm where we plugged in his shield, and a little nub there, which will slot into the top of his forearm. So just wedge this in his hand, and line this piece up. Then flip this around, and once again, peg it into that port. Can be a little bit tricky to line everything up, but it will snap into place just fine. This can then hinge back And it's in its beam rifle mode. A little bit forced. This thing always looked quite ridiculous. At least the Exia's Geon sword tried to make it look like a gun, but yeah, I don't know what that's supposed to be. An emitter there, there, and there. And, well, it sure is a thing. Once again, this can slot forward and become the massive Geon Sword 3, which he holds up really, really well. A combination of tight joints in his arm, as well as metal content, allows him to support this really better than any other version of the 00 Gundam I've seen. Looks awesome. Now let's take a look at the largest of the accessories, if you can even call it that, the O-Riser Support Unit. It's got a very similar style to the Gundam itself, with all of the tampo markings and other meticulous details. The sculpt is great, very sharp, and the proportions are just about perfect as far as I'm concerned. It's got landing gear at the bottom that can fold up. It's a little bit difficult getting that back out, so you might need some kind of tool to help you with that. It's got little fins on the side here that extend, and little wings that can further hinge out. Although I think those are a little more exclusive to the 00 Riser, once again. Little panels on the back here, maybe for turning, that can go in and out. And a booster back here that can extend. You have to unpeg it from the top, and then it's on a geared system from there. This actually never happens in the show, but it must be from some kind of concept art, because plenty of O-Risers tend to have this feature. Now you can pop off the main sensor here, at least the orange one, and replace it with a white cover to represent what it looks like on the back of the 00 Gundam in Awakening of the Trailblazer. I just want to get that out of the way before we combine it, because we're not going to be talking about it again. Now you can take these shield parts. There's little holes on the side. Those will peg on just like that. It's another option if you want it. And you can also take the Geon Sword 3 and extend these little pegs. If I can get this out, there we go. Now those will peg right into those ports there. So you can store this on the bottom, just like that. Last but not least, there's also a little bit of landing gear that extends from the bottom of the sword itself, so that it can stand upright like this, albeit very rickety. Now obviously the O-Riser, being a spacefaring vehicle, needs a stand of its own, and it comes in the form of this. It's really nice looking, has a plaque of sorts there, GNR 10 O-Riser, has some manufacturing and pilot details. Looks really good. Got this arm here, which attaches via a square peg, and very similar to a Tamashii stage, it's got these little pieces that can come out, and you can swap around, so you can place this any which way you'd like. So that's pretty cool. The arm itself has a very tight ratchet here, here, and here. So you can get this all over the place, which is great. Now you can attach it one of two ways to the stand. You can either use this adapter piece, which plugs in just like the Geon Sword 3, and then slots on like that. Or you can pull this off, attach the Geon Sword 3 itself, and plug this straight on, which is actually a bit more solid, unfortunately. I say that because I don't display it like this very often. Oh well. Makes for some nice dynamic turns and angles and things. It's a nice stand nevertheless. Now the 00 Gundam has a stand of its own, but before we take a look at that, let's finally combine the two into the 00 Riser. Prepping the Gundam itself here, going to take this back plate off and pull out the GN drives. They have a little mechanism in there that keep them in place pretty well, but also make them easily removable. Now you can replace them with either the standard GN drives or, once again, the movie version condensers. We're just going to go with the normal ones here from the show. They have this ratcheting rotation bit here, and we'll plug into the binder a lot more solidly so that the combination just generally works better. From there, let's take the O-riser and pull it apart. The binders come off in a similar fashion to the GN drives, actually. A very similar mechanism. We'll work with the central section first. These pieces here come up slightly. And this whole thing folds in half, like that, with a couple of hinges in there. There's a peg there. That'll go straight into the port opened up on his back. If I can line it up. Those little pegs up there slot into the top of his backpack. And this whole thing should snap together really well. Just like that. Very solid. Not bad. As you can see, he can even stand just fine with all that back heaviness because of how much metal is in his skeleton. Now for the binders. Basically, all you're going to do is open up these sections, just like that, and slide it on to the new GN drives. Like so. He also has these guns here that fold away just like that. Plug the other one on. And there is the 00 Riser. Very impressive, very big, no weight issues at all, like I said, just because of how much metal is in the main core and the lack of metal in the O-Riser. Makes for a very balanced piece, despite how it looks. Like I said, it has these ratchets here, so these can go forward and back, even up if you want, without any problem, and that's a very, very nice sound. Like I said earlier, these can come up out of the way, and once again, there's no weight issues, even with these out almost vertically. It's really, really good. Looks amazing, too. The 00 Riser's own stand is very similar in style to that of the O-Riser, except it has different tech specs, obviously. Says 00 Riser on it, and has all of the details of the mobile suit, which is really cool. This is obviously just the base, but the appendage itself is rather complex. This is sort of a standard for the metal build figures. They all have a very similar stand. Got a big hinge down there, hinge there, there. Little locking mechanism that allows this to slide up and down. A similar locking mechanism that allows this to extend even further. and a very simple system for locking in the actual peg. But it gets the job done. Put the pegs into the ports, and you're good to go. Now there are two ways of supporting the 00 Gundam with this stand, one of these being wrong. You get this. Do not try making him airborne with this. It goes around his waist and does not hold onto him securely at all. Only use this in, well, standing up positions that you want to support maybe just a little bit more. I find this very useless, is the only word that comes to mind. But you get this clear extension piece with a different end on it than that of the one here. It'll slide on just like that, and you can then peg it to the bottom of the Gundam. Very secure. It does wobble just a little bit, but it's not going to break. Get him into a ideal pose. And there you have it. Now you do get a couple of other pieces, which I can only assume are for helping support the Geon Sword 3. But like I said earlier, the Geon Sword 3 supports itself just fine without these. So once again, these seem very extraneous, and I'm not sure I'm going to use them very much, if at all. Get this piece. It's completely clear. It's got little rubber bits at the bottom for support. This is for supporting the Geon Sword 3 when he's on the stand, and you get a shorter version of the little appendage there for if he's not on the stand. Once again, this seems kind of pointless. Once all is said and done, that is it. This is one of the most incredible pieces I have ever had the pleasure of having in my collection. A fantastic fit, finish, feel, and quality, and it goes without saying that it looks stunning on the shelf. The only problem here is the price. It's a Bandai Collector Shop exclusive Chogokin that is accumulating some age. I don't think at the time of this review you'll be able to find this under $300, maybe $350 even. Now, most people are not going to want to pay that price, and honestly, they shouldn't. For the casual collector, this is not worth that price. Most people will settle for the master grade model kit if they want a 00 in their collection and call it good. But for those die-hard fans, people like me who this might be their favorite not only Gundam, but robot design of all time, those people will be willing to pay that price. And for those people, it is absolutely worth it. So whether you are a die-hard fan willing to pay that price, or a robot collector that just wants a little bit of a finer wine with their 00 Gundam, and maybe a lot more metal, look no further, because this is one of the best 00 Gundam figures ever made. Anyway, that is about it, guys, and this is IX RolloutIX, signing off.